Thank you. Am I audible enough at the back there? Okay. My name is Dennis Asimwe. I work with the Global Green Growth Institute. This is a treaty-based organization of 36 member countries, Uganda having become the 33rd member last year. The Green Growth Institute largely focuses on supporting its member governments or countries in promoting sustainable and inclusive economic development. My brief here today is to present on behalf of my colleague, as you heard in the plenary, who had an accident, Doug Mazwebe, the country representative. I personally run the portfolio of trying to access the Green Climate Fund for Uganda. So my job revolves around supporting GOU and both state and non-state actors in accessing climate finance. So today I would like to share with you prospects through the presentation of exploring finance access through the various mechanisms, and also share with you some of the experiences that we have as Global Green Growth Institute in this area. So I'll be talking about largely the national financing vehicle as a possibility of accessing climate finance. I said that we try to work with governments to access, to have sustainable and inclusive growth. And this we try to do by supporting them to articulate green strategies, policies. You heard earlier that we have supported the National Planning Authority, or worked with them in articulating the Uganda Green Growth Development Strategy. And within there, a number of priority areas are highlighted. You'll also realize that within that, there's a commitment to mobilizing up to $450 million towards green climate or green infrastructure investments. But whilst we have those kind of challenges before us in terms of mobilizing finance, we're also aware that Uganda has committed itself to the Paris Agreement through the nationally determined commitments, which is a 5-year rolling commitment, and it comes with certain requirements for us to be able to meet our contribution towards, for instance, reducing our greenhouse gas emissions. And all these, over time, it has been realized over the last 2 years that the Conference of Parties of the UNFCCC has deliberately taken a position that we should now begin to focus on implementing these commitments through local entities or through local projects. But who are supposed to implement these activities? Do we have the capacity internally in the country to be able to access funds to execute or deliver towards these commitments? So you realize that on the climate finance architecture internationally, there are varied funds available or financing mechanisms with various interests that come with them and requirements. So you find that these present a challenge for some of our small countries or less developed countries in terms of capacities, institutional and otherwise, including developing of bankable projects to access these kind of facilities. So this is becoming increasingly a challenge. And from our practice, some of the options that we have come across in our portfolio as a potential source or avenue for mobilizing finance being the national financing vehicles. This is essentially a framework within which resources can be mobilized. It could take a public outlook to it, a public-private outlook to it, depending on the circumstances of jurisdiction. You will find in Ethiopia, where you have the climate resistance facility, It is a public facility established between two government departments, the Environment Function, Environment Commission, and the Ministry of Finance. So it's executed jointly. So we think that the NFVs can provide an avenue for addressing or circumventing some of these challenges to be able to increase flows. We have supported a number of countries within our membership, over 10 of them across the globe, Latin America, Asia, and Africa. The closer ones to home are in Ethiopia and Rwanda. In Rwanda, where now they have been able to mobilize up to $53 to $55 million with initial contribution by the government. So this support ranges from establishment, scaling, restructuring, pipeline development, amongst others. What lessons do we learn? I will not go through the whole of them. One is that we need to have a long-term thinking or strategy or outlook towards mobilizing climate finance or dealing with the climate change challenges that we face as a country. I'm aware there is an attempt through the NDCs to do that, but increasingly now, the conversation to have the low emission development strategy, which is a more long-term framework, is underway now. I know GIZ is supporting that kind of conversation. The question then would be, at what level does it stop? Would it stop at the national level? Do we cascade it to the subnationals or local government levels? So those are questions that we may have to reflect on as actors in this space. For a sustainable operation, like I indicated in the case of Rwanda, the commitment of the government in pooling resources is a motivation or motivator for long-term actors as well in the space. So I think Rwanda committed up to close to 10% of that basket towards that. So those are some of the things we need to strongly think about. How can we engage the actors within our GCF readiness and strengthening project? We are seeking to deliberately engage the private actors, the private sectors. What interests them in the climate finance space, both as implementers or even as potentially financiers? I was speaking to somebody earlier in the breaks, and they were indicating there's a Canadian outfit or foundation which seeks to establish climate finance banks in Uganda, but they are lost. So I thought probably this was a good opportunity for us to engage, since we are beginning to mobilize both state and non-state actors in the climate finance aspect or space. The institutionalization of climate resource mobilization doesn't seem to be clear presently. We are working with the Ministry of Finance to try and strengthen this function and try and see if it can be institutionalized, and probably it could now provide a gateway for operationalizing the national financing vehicles. I'm aware that Uganda Development Bank is greening its process. It has its function. So the question is, would it be an option for us to consider as we articulate or foster this idea of the national financing vehicles, which we think can be more responsive to the local setups. They are able to attract both national and international financing, and then we're able to engage further. I will not take a lot of time and just suggest this could be a possible structure. The national financing vehicle can have flows from either international markets or nationally, and it can flow either through commercial financial institutions. Closer to home, I think what could quickly come to my mind is the agricultural credit facility in the BOU and other related facilities. Is this something we can pick a lesson from in trying to advance this agenda? It could go straight to the project, depending on the quality of the project. So one of the things we're doing is to help entities and private actors to develop strong concept notes that can be transitioned into full proposals and be able to attract the necessary financing. That's the GCF. That is basically the mechanism through which we are trying to advance this kind of support. And over the next couple of years, our focus is on a multi-year approach so that we're able to transition this thing. Developing an NFV can go anywhere from 12 to 24 months. And we're saying, while aware of that, when we're working with entities, we are also developing concept notes parallel, because they can also be, developing a full proposal can be time-consuming and resource demanding. So we think if we run this concurrently, we're able to realize our aspirations as a country. I'll stop at that, and then probably in the subsequent
draft over rainy seasons that disturbs completely the process of production in agriculture. And the last factor is that very few agriculture companies or SMEs have access to banking services, which hampers their capacity to invest into some equipments to improve productivity, and they are much more fragile if they don't access to financial services. And I put at the end that the interest rates are very high, but it's not because banks don't do their job, it's because the sector is very risky. It's risky because of the climate, risky because of the disease, risky because of low cost. Well, all the factors of risk are concentrated in agriculture. So that's why rates are the most expensive for the sector. The program objective is first improving financial inclusion. So we bring service to agriculture and rural sector, financing projects like storage, transport, what makes the production go up to the places, the marketplaces. Most of the time, what is lacking is storage facilities. So production is sold at low prices because agriculture people need to get rid quickly of their production. So we support as well with this project financial institution, mainly microfinance one, to develop their activities toward agriculture sector. The project targets as well strengthening technical and financial capacities of local actors to bring them to find more sustainable agriculture, less use of pesticide, less destruction of environment, for a more sustainable activity. This line of credit is a concessional one. It means that the interest rate that is given to the bank, because it's an intermediate line of credit that is funded to Uganda Development Bank, UDB. So it's concessional because the interest rate is compliant with ODA, with the development aid, and part of the interest rate that is accounted is taken by French government as development aid, and that makes the interest rate that is done to proposed to agriculture sector much less than if it was a commercial loan. There is technical assistance part in this financing, financed through grant, to assist a financial institution to develop products dedicated to agriculture sector, strengthening capacities, working on helping financial beneficiaries to improve their practice of agriculture and to develop their business, etc., and working with the cooperative, which are groupment of agricultures that will mitigate risks and have better prices when selling their products. The targets are micro enterprises, very small businesses, SMEs. You have quite a few criteria of definition because we need ones, but so micro enterprises, SMEs, farmers groups, and microfinance institutions. The impacts that are expected is that 30,000 credits are delivered to beneficiaries. 100 beneficiaries are IMF or project holders. 50% of beneficiaries are women, and excuse me for the O that is missing in women. And we accept the increase of the share of green and adaptation to climate change to be plus 20% from the portfolio of the bank financial institution portfolio. So this is the impact that is foreseen. Well, I have another slide which is not I don't have any other slide, so I will remain at your disposal for to answer to any question about this credit line. Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Eugene Ntananga. I work for a KfW project called the Biodiversity Investment Fund, and we are implementers for this. It's being implemented by a company called Agriculture Finance Consultants, which is a financial German-based consultancy, and the project is being managed by the East African Development Bank on behalf of KfW. Some small background. This project started at the beginning of 2018. So we're in the second year of implementation. It's a €6 million fund. We give out loans. That means this is commercial financing. We give out loans in local currency. We try to scope the environment and realized one of the things that was missing, as you may have found out through earlier discussions, was the lack of long-term financing, medium to long-term, which businesses that are looking at doing big things, especially when you're looking at interventions in biodiversity, conservation, green financing, it takes a lot longer than usually the short-term money you find in commercial banks. So we can lend money up to 10 years. That doesn't mean you need to take money for 10 years. It means if your project projections dictate that you need 10 years, we are happy to do that. Also, another thing we do is we give generous grace periods up to 2 to 3 years, again, depending on what your project needs. If your project, just thinking, if you're trying to build a lodge somewhere in Queen Elizabeth National Park, and between taking the money and opening your doors to your clients, it's going to take you 2.5 years, 3 years. We are happy to consider that because we obviously don't expect you to be generating any money before you open your doors. That is something we found a lot of entrepreneurs find beneficial, as opposed to mainstream banks that require you to pay usually money immediately you take out the loan. As I indicated, the fund is managed by the East African Development Bank, and the initial capitalization came from KfW. Now, this is a sort of pilot. It's focused on Uganda. The lessons we are going to take after the initial period of 3 years, which should be ending at the beginning of next year, there is an opportunity that this fund could be recapitalized, bring in new actors, like my friend Adolfo and the EU. There are possibly people that could be interested in this, and we can blow it up into the region, especially given that EADB is a regional bank. This can work well in Kenya, Tanzania, Rwanda, Burundi. The focus here, the subject matter today is green finance. In our world, we try to define this or look at it from the biodiversity perspective. I think it arrives at the same conclusions. And we are trying to promote businesses that in turn have a contribution towards the environment, towards conservation, towards biodiversity. You've heard from many speakers at different turns today that and actually I think it's evident, we are starting to see rains come at times of the year when they shouldn't be. We are having droughts increasingly. Our friends more so in Tanzania, Malawi, have had rains up to now. They should have stopped 4 months ago. So that means product is going to die. So what we are trying to say is, how can we support businesses that if we support them, they are also going to do well for our environment, because only if they succeed are we going to all of us succeed. So, and later on in the presentation, I'll demonstrate some of the key things we look out for. But essentially, businesses have to also demonstrate that they can measure that contribution they're making towards the environment. Having said that, it then leads us to what sectors will give us the highest return on our investment or to the environment. And we discovered doing organic agriculture, again looking at the high value, like my friend at AFD was saying, focusing on the high value crops. Maize is wonderful, but maize is not going to bring a typical farmer enough revenue. What that means is they need to plow a lot more garden, meaning land is not, it's a finite resource. So that means that farmer typically is going to start encroaching on protected areas, forests, to get more land. Whereas if they were focusing on high value crops within a few acres, 1 or 2, if you're doing macadamia, avocados, herbs, you could actually get a lot of revenue that you don't need a lot of land. So that's the thinking. That is an example. We also support forestry, and also we not just focus on trees, but we focus also on what else can be done in a forest. Because if somebody living near Mabira today finds an alternative way they can benefit from that forest without cutting trees, then they're encouraged to preserve it. So that's the approach. So looking at tourism in forests, looking at apiculture, that's beekeeping. So they look at the forest as an enabler of their livelihood, as opposed to something preventing them from making a quick buck by cutting down a forest to go make charcoal. Fisheries, we're seeing bringing this back home. About 4 years ago, the wild fisheries caught in the lakes really came down. So we are encouraging aquaculture. These are private farms, so that pressure reduces. In tourism, this is no-brainer. When people look at these animals, forests, and all these as areas where they can benefit, when they look at the wildlife as something they can get income out of, as opposed to something that is coming to destroy their crops, they are likely to protect it. Renewable energy, we also support this. Our focus for now has been mostly on solar, again, to try to dissuade people from, burning charcoal, as opposed to for lighting and cooking, as opposed to giving alternative as using solar and biogas. This is what I talked about. We go in a little bit when we are talking to an entrepreneur to find out where our intervention can go and how we can be able to best advise them. So we look at geographical prioritization. Where is that business? Is it in a priority area near a national park, a game reserve? And we look at the positive and measurable environmental aspects of that business. Does that business have, and we look at 3 key pillars there: green production and services, inclusive business, and conservation and restoration of habitats. So here, green production would be, for instance, if you're coming and telling us you're building a lodge, we are very much interested to see how are you building that lodge. Are you incorporating solar energy? Are you incorporating harvesting water, etc.? Are you using alternative sources of energy for heating, for cooking, etc. Inclusive business, we are looking at, are you including the ecosystems around you? Are you sourcing locally? Are you employing local populations, as opposed to bringing experts from Kampala, but are you hiring local people there? Restoration of habitats, for instance, are you paying back into the ecosystems? For instance, are you paying some money towards wildlife authority for them to rehabilitate animals, or train and hire more these people dissuading away poachers? By far and large, we try to follow the World Bank and IFC performance standards, and 5 and 6 apply most into our methodology. This is again what I was referring to. This map is interesting. We got this from, I believe, WCS. The areas, you could call it purple, are the high biodiversity areas. Now, when we are trying to, for instance, if I have 2 projects I'm looking at, one in Kampala, you're trying to build a hotel or lodge in Kampala, and somebody trying to build a lodge around Kidepo. Our methodology says priority, if I have limited resources, I should give priority to that project in Kidepo, because that project is more likely to deliver a higher return on conservation and biodiversity vis-a-vis an urban hotel. I'll just end with this slide. In addition to financing, what we also try to do is provide free technical assistance to projects that go through our, probably go towards financing. We'll advise these businesses on how to climate-proof their businesses and how to input that biodiversity impact we're talking about. We'll also help these businesses, as we've realized, a lot of the challenge with most businesses in Uganda is lack of proper understanding of proper capital structure. Some businesses are looking for debt, but when you talk to them, you realize quickly that these are young businesses, that taking on debt is probably not the best approach. We'll give you advice on what other alternative sources of financing you may take, and we're happy to introduce you to people who might help you, like equity providers, mezzanine debt providers. Because for us, also working for a development bank, we're not in the business of selling money, we're in the business of development. So we really focus on you, your business, your proposal succeeding vis-a-vis just taking money. And we'll also help you on other strategic approaches and operational issues, marketing, staffing, and other capacity building. So I'm happy to take further questions. All those who might find this interesting for them. I've seen a few faces of people I've already interacted with at the office, but I'm happy to also share a card or schedule a side meeting for us to discuss more in detail. Thank you.
Thank you, Eugene. We gave you a little bit of long of time. And we are not going to charge you because we are green and nice. But anyhow, we move now into the presentation from Idrissa. Idrissa is going to present a new program, a new contract that we just signed at Enfi, that is a German institution. They are focusing on supporting startups and new companies that they need both technical assistance and finances to run their businesses. We expected Rainer asked to come to do the presentation from Adelphi, but he's German. And as many of you know, German people are not allowed to come unless they have 14 days of quarantine, so in the end they didn't come. But Eugene is the local partner of Adelphi, and we are also pleased to have him here today. He will be able to do the presentation on behalf of Adelphi, and what?
Yeah, just. This one is out. This one is in. You have this one.
Okay, yours.
All right. Thank you so much, Adolfo. My name is Eddie Sembata. I'm the Managing Director of Finding XY, a partner of Adelphi, implementing the Uganda Green Enterprise Finance Accelerator. Just to give you a small background, so many of us, of course, have had so many stories of impact being created at the bottom of the pyramid, but the status quo still remains the same. The challenges still remain the same. So the thought for us was, how can we create something that is going to actually prove that we can create sustainable impact at the bottom of the pyramid? And primary to that was creating a financing product that can actually support SMEs that are working in these areas. And this is the Uganda Green Enterprise Finance Accelerator, as shown there, with the support of the European Union, being implemented by Adelphi. The purpose of this program is to improve access to finance for green enterprises through facilitating tailored loans and direct acceleration support. And I'm going to explain to you what that exactly means. So the context of this, we will review the challenges, chickens or eggs, and what that means, challenges for SME financing in Uganda. We'll show you our criteria of the solutions that we developed, give you an example of a solution that we're going to be putting out, and briefly introduce to you the Uganda Green Enterprise Finance Accelerator. Previously in September, we carried out a scoping exercise, meeting different banks and different public servants or people in government, also speaking to different SMEs, trying to understand what are the challenges behind SME financing, green SME financing. And for the SMEs and for the banks, they say that there are not enough good quality applications for loans they receive from SMEs. Therefore, they are unable to finance them. For the SMEs, they say that banks do not have interest in them, so it is impossible to get a loan. While development partners and the government say that green SMEs play a critical role in job creation, economic development, and sustainable development. So it looks right there that there is something not right. Both these parties have the same interest, but the money is not moving. These claims are common and characteristic of all SME financing markets in the world. The question is, who shall move and how can the different interests be aligned? Challenges of SMEs are both internal and external. And based on these interviews we had last year in September, we established that for the SMEs, there is a significant lack of commitment in terms of how they design their businesses. It's easy to find someone today doing real estate, tomorrow they are into agriculture, and then the next time they are consultants. But it's the same entrepreneur. So the banks also find it hard to trace where this business is actually going, because the entrepreneurs keep on evolving in what they're doing. Lifespan of existence, and because of that, typical change becomes very short. Financial systems and record keeping are not there. Business model resilience. Most of the business models are not implemented for a long period of time to allow them to understand what actually works. Financing requests and usage of funds. Most of the entrepreneurs request money to access machinery, and the money ends up in real estate. And then the leadership bottleneck. You find a lot of good entrepreneurs that are very passionate about their business, selling their commodities, but they lack the strategic perspective of actually developing this business in the right direction. And then there are these that are outside their control. We have collateral needs, ability to contribute financing, cash flow fluctuations because of maybe how they run their businesses, high transactional costs, and high interest rates. So we took a number of issues when we were designing the solution, and one of those was maximizing enterprise outreach and access. Can we develop something that can maximize enterprise outreach and access, can be implemented fast, has low transactional costs, is scalable, open to multiple partners, avoiding on-lending cost accumulation, and directly working with financial institutions. So our solution actually embeds all these principles in there. And here is an example of a partial repayment scheme, just to demonstrate to you how the Uganda Green Enterprise Finance Accelerator works. We have two components, non-financial support and the financial support. Through UGEFA, for example, we will support SMEs that will go through some of our accelerator programs to make them bankable and ready for investment, and we will present these to the financial institutions. As you can see there, if you can look at the top, the loan application, a loan application with 25% down payment of own capital for the investment. If you see in the middle there, 25% upfront loan repayment through a grant, and 50% loan repayment over a time period till maturity of the loan. What this means is that the SMEs can actually use this grant facility to offset their loan that they're taking up from the bank. So our primary focus is to channel this financing through financial institutions, because we believe this will bring about sustainability. So the SMEs can then use this facility to offset some of their repayments. Maybe they have challenges with the cash flow, they can use that. If they have challenges with collateral, they can use that. So this is our thinking, and this is how we've designed the thinking to keep this facility within the financial institutions and allow SMEs to have a reliable partner that they can continue to work with even after the project period. The advantages of this is that it reduces the effective cost of capital and collateral requirements. It provides intense non-financial support with a focus on providing financial and other information for loan application. So this is the Uganda Green Enterprise Finance Accelerator. We improve access to finance for green enterprises through facilitating tailored loans and direct acceleration support. There are three components here: capacity building of scalable green enterprises in Uganda, working alongside banks to facilitate green SME access to tailored loans, engaging an ecosystem around green and climate finance for SMEs. There are so many collaboration opportunities, and we invite more partners that are willing to work with us. If we pull this off, it will be a first, and I'm sure we would all want to see success for SMEs accessing finance. We want to collaborate with commercial banks by co-creating of tailored loan facilitation mechanisms, holding annual green finance dialogue for us, providing technical assistance to the banks to create green financing products, interactive green and climate finance trainings for the banks again. Then we provide green enterprise capacity building by capacity building for financial readiness and growth, facilitation of access to loans, capacity building to absorb, finance, and grow, and then support for impact assessment. Please reach out to us if you find this product very interesting. It will be launched out this month, and we look forward to hearing from you and interacting with you about the same. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Lisa, for this presentation. Yes, this project is starting now, and we are looking for companies to work with. So we are building pipeline of green companies now as well. So welcome to get in touch with Lisa for this, and to get in touch with green companies. We are quite okay in time. It's 7:15. We're going to open for questions to any of the panelists. As we agree, we have the 4 presentations, one after the other. So please, when you ask a question, tell us who are you, and who do you address the question to. And I'm sure the panelists will be glad to answer the questions. So the floor is open, and maybe somebody needs to help us move the mic around. I don't see that. Anyhow, it's open for questions. I'll pass the mic to you. Pass the mic to anyone.
Good afternoon. My name is Roger Renzo. I'm the Managing Director of Soft Bridge Investments. My question goes to any of you actually take it on. An SME is already accessing a facility. I'll send this one to Eddie. SME is already accessing a facility in another bank. And probably they went into this a lot earlier before getting to know about your initiatives and so on and so forth. So we're looking at a venture at the moment that is incurring a very huge interest rate. And obviously they want to transition to something that is more suitable. Are you willing to support this? It can also, the question can also go to the same gym. With your organization as well, entertain a transition, an SME moving from, say, one bank that they were previously working with to your service that is hopefully suitable and more tailored to the needs of today, especially given the interest rate. Thank you very much. Thank you, moderator. Then, what's in you, Yuma? The microfinance support center. Network is myself, EADB, again. When I look at the map, you look at there, that if you had some funds, you'd rather maybe to somebody building a lodge, as opposed to a very organized. I'd like to suggest that looks like the traditional approach. But we find that out of the 49 million or about 49 million people in Uganda, the majority of people are living in where the urban poor or in the rural areas. And these rural areas, they are actually impacted negatively on the environment. As we go out to the next level of funding the fund, would you be able to, would you consider other topics which don't seem to be like greening? Exactly, we need a lot of greening within our communities.
Thank you all. Tremendous presentation. The best presentation. We dealt with our young process through a program called Sunrise. And I want to say it is one of the most professionally executed due diligences ever done. After a year and a half, our company, Farms, which is Uganda's first certified organic company, now 22 years old, was given a SunDREF certificate, except the commercial bank we dealt with for the last 24 years did not finance it. How do we tackle this? It's outrageous that it's happening.
Thank you so much. My name is Kelvin Ochaya from Global International Research Institute. Basically what we do is we partner with universities and run a program called Entrepreneurship Training where students come up with innovations that solve community challenges. Now my question goes to Nanaga. Do you support entrepreneurs who are on idea-based and do not have a proof of concept? That they're just on an idea level.
I think we already have enough questions to answer. I think we already have enough questions to answer. So there was a question that was more general from our friend here. Let me maybe give you the chance first to answer that one, but that one is more for everybody actually. So you want to answer that one from him? The question. I think it's better. No, I think he was
I think from what I heard, you're asking if refinances are allowed, for instance, in my project. I don't know about Eddie. Eddie will also, I think, have that opportunity to answer for himself. Now, for me, for this project, unfortunately, refinancing is not allowed. You see, refinances, typically financial institutions don't like them because you may be inheriting some legacy problems that you may not be aware of. So as a principle, they don't. Now, there are some scenarios where you could look at a refinance. Maybe you are about to close that repayment, that initial loan, or you are doing a huge expansion, a little bit different, but perhaps your collateral is still tied with bank A, and it's a very small amount. So I would rather buy it out, free up your collateral, so that I can take it to to stand in for the bigger loan. We can look into that, so it should be a case by case. But that's for me, so maybe you can also speak about
our impact. Our criteria is that you're supposed to be impact oriented, so that's what makes you a green enterprise, and the products we're going to be using to provide this financing are really going to be tailored in partnership with the financial institutions. And I agree with Eugene that financial institutions don't really appreciate the concept of refinancing because it's of no benefit really to the investor. It rather causes them a financial loss. So no, we are not considering refinancing because these products are really going to be tailored in partnership with the financial institutions, and the businesses have to be impact oriented, so will not be taking on history that you through which you got this loan facility from, because there's a track record for that. But we will be open to working with new projects and that have a clean slate for financing. I hope that's clear.
Okay, there were more questions that were addressed to a specific panelist. I think that there was a question from our friend from Humphrey Farms related to SunRev due diligence and the fact that some banks have not provided finance to them even if they got this certification. I think that is for you.
Thank you very much. If I understand well, your project has the certification about SunRev, but you didn't find the right financing.
The Joint Trust Bank, which I was referred to by
Yes.
SunRev, said well, that they weren't able to make loans at that time.
I don't have really an explanation for that because on our side we fixed some criteria for Diamond Trust Bank that are compliant with the SunRev principles, and normally all the projects that correspond to that criteria are eligible to our financing. I don't have the reason. I cannot answer this question, but I cannot say, because really those criteria are fixed in our loan contract between the DTBU and AFD. So I don't know. It may be for some reason, but I cannot have it. Maybe we can discuss it later. So sorry, I cannot give an answer.
There are some things that I have to be discussing private, no? I guess. There are two more questions that they were addressed to Eugene. One was from microfinance, and then the other one from our friend behind there. So.
Thank you for those questions. Mr. Walusimbi, regarding prioritization, if you go back to our definition of what biodiversity and conservation, really that is, you see every project, there's so lots of projects trying to track different impacts. Now, the wisdom of people who design this project, they reckon that you achieve the highest biodiversity in certain areas. And those are areas that around protected areas. We're talking about national parks, game reserves, forest reserves, wetlands. Those are scientific areas that when you promote those, you get your biggest bang for your money, so to speak. I mean, I may have, and of course, conservation can be done everywhere. From my home, I can choose what kind of lighting to use, what kind of energy sources to use. But if I take that to a bigger, more important area, and I say, I'm going to sponsor the preservation of a certain big wetland, the country is more likely to benefit from such an intervention there than a smaller area. However, and again I use that example as if I had two projects, you know, and I had to choose one. So obviously I will go with where I score the highest return for my money in terms of biodiversity. But still, we'll look into individual projects. If you have a project, let's say you have a hotel and you're saying, oh, I need to change my lighting source so that I reduce my reliance on the grid, hence saving, and I'm going to use some LED bulbs, and I'm going to, which is still very positive for the environment. Or I'm going to change my water heating source to solar to power a hospital. That is positive, and we'll support that. But the other one, I was just giving an example. The other question was around, could my project, for instance, the biodiversity investment project, finance ideas or concepts? No. This is commercial financing. At the end of the day, you have to demonstrate that you are able to repay this loan if given to you. unfortunately, the business has to demonstrate viability in addition to those wonderful green financing attributes. Yeah, so maybe Mr. Adolf, the EU may have some small pocket of money where you can fund these great ideas, but when you are facing a financial institution, they need to see that they can get back that money they lent to you.
Maybe just adding to this one. Today in the panel we have a combination of people from government, I mean people dealing with government for the financing vehicle. They're working with the National Bank, with the Uganda-Europe Bank, to provide more green finance. Then we have a regime that deals directly with private sector, green private sector projects, but then we also have a regime that is going to deal with the small companies that sometimes they cannot go directly to the finance institution. So that combination of technical assistance to those companies, startups, people that are just starting in the business, that combination of, let's say, technical assistance that is granted is very important for companies to be able to face the elected stage finance institutions. So you have here the representation of all these different levels of green finance that they are needed in a country to move those things forward. So thank you for attending. There was another question from the person in the back.
I think that was this. That was this question. Yeah.
So we have arrived to 7:30 exact. That was the plan. Presentations have been done. Questions have been asked and answered. And then we want to.
Everybody's invited to the gala dinner. Whoever is interested, you can get your coupon from Adolfo.
Simon, clap for it, yeah? So thank you to everybody. Of course, interactions with the panelists are welcome. And yes, whoever wants to go for the dinner, I have a lot of coupons, no? So I don't know if I want to send them. All right, thank you so much.
Anybody who has not had a coupon for the dinner and wants one, it's now or never.
And I saw the ambassador.
no interest.